Meta-coaching is one of our processes in neurosemantics we've been doing around the world, and I think we've done 17 meta-coaches. We've got 550 meta-coaches around the world. This training will apply to the PCMC credentials for those of you going on to the professionally certified meta-coach, so these 3 days will count for that, and it'll be part of the requirements for that if you continue the process in meta-coaching. We also have some neurosemantic trainers here. Those of you who are neurosemantic trainers, if you'll stand. So we got Vasily from the Netherlands. We got Jim Walsh from where are you from? From Florida. So we appreciate both of you trainers being here. In working through the process, the manual that you have is our first prototype manual. And it is the basis that we're walking through different things. In 2 months, in 8 weeks, we're going to have a book. It's called Unleashed, a guide to unleashing your potentials. And so it'll be out in 8 weeks. We're going to have some forms later on today if you want to order a copy of that. Those of you who are going to be here Monday to be on what we're calling the Trainer's Day, we're going to, on the Trainer's Day, go into self-actualization psychology and look at the grounding, the background of the human potential movement. Because what we're planning to do in neurosemantics is to initiate a new movement, a 21st century achieving human potential movement, because the old human potential movement of the 1960s and 70s died. It just vanished, it disappeared, it diminished, it went away. And part of my research has been trying to find out where did it go and what happened to it and what can we do to initiate achieving human potential with human capital and human resources in people in the 21st century with the resources we have. So those of you who are going to be here on Monday, if you'll see me at the break, when we call the break this morning, if you'll immediately come up, because I've got an assignment for you. So... Surprise, surprise. So I need to see you at here. A couple people have asked me about a couple things. Meta-coaching, we have the meta-coaching brochure, and if you'd like to look at that, we do meta-coaching in Mexico this year, in Sydney, and in Johannesburg. So we got 3 places this year. And those of you interested in the neurosemantic trainers training in New Zealand, we've got a couple people here who's going to go for that, and we've got brochures on that for New Zealand this year. So that's enough advertisement stuff. Okay.
Just a comment, Michael, in regard to where has the humanistic movement gone? I think a lot of it went underground. I'm using it.
Yeah.
I've used it in practice ever since day one with the offender population.
So the content is permeated around, but there's no movement anymore.
Yeah, I hear that. That's what I'm saying. I think it went underground, and it's just not out there. But I know for myself that the vast majority of what you talk about in here, although I use it in slightly different constructs and use different language, the vast majority of what I've seen so far I'm already using in treatment.
So let me say a few words about that. Abraham Maslow changed the whole paradigm of psychology when he decided to stop studying the neurotic people and the psychotic people as a model of human nature, because if you study the sick and make that a paradigm of human nature, then human nature is pretty messed up. And so Abraham Maslow changed the paradigm from the dark side of human nature, and as he studied that, he decided we had instincts of aggression, instincts of competition and sex and death. And so he didn't think much of people. And if you read the biography of Sigmund Freud, he really didn't think much of people and didn't really like people because his view, his paradigm, his frame of human nature. Maslow started studying the best specimens and the self-actualizing one and the bright side of human nature. And the premises that came out of that are premises like people have all kinds of resources. People will do the best they can in their circumstances and have positive intents. Have you ever heard these things before? Because they have permeated, in NLP we call these NLP presuppositions. Maslow and Carl Rogers came up with them. Virginia Satir and Fritz Perls to other leaders in the human potential movement. Pearls was the first scholar in residence at Esalen. Virginia Satir was the first director of research and development at Esalen. Gregory Bateson was the last scholar in residence at Esalen. And so they were the second generation, as it were, leaders in the human potential movement. And as Bandler and Grinder modeled them, they came up with NLP presuppositions. And so we are a stepchild of the human potential movement in NLP and neural semantics, and in Ericksonian and solution focus. Many, many other psychologies have realized that this is the direction psychology should go. And indeed, now in the 21st century, this is the main direction that the older schools of psychology are, because they're not that effective. They're kind of like the Model T versus the Porsches we've got. We don't. So as we develop higher and better things, Maslow died at 62 years old of a massive heart attack in 1970. And in his memoirs, he had written that he wanted to write a book on self-actualization psychology. And he never did that. So I'm audacious enough. I run in where even fools are fearful of going. I want to write that book. I want to pick up and go on from where he started to put together a model of this and to integrate all the tools we have from the many different psychologies and to formulate that. So that's partly what we're doing with this workshop and some of the other things that'll be coming along. So most of us have already been well informed into the bright side of psychology, of human nature, modeling excellence, and using these premises of human nature, that we have all the resources we need. We just need to put them together. And that communication is the main mechanism by which we communicate to ourselves and create our reality. And, the next person who's going to be up. Thank you. I always want to know who's next. So we take these premises that have been part and parcel of NLP and of neurosemantics, and it's part of what was the human potential movement. Now, if you want to read a couple articles, I've written NLP as a child of the human potential movement, and that's on the website. How to Kill a Movement is the last month or 2 months ago in Actualize, which you can sign up for those things from neurosemantics.com. So that is the direction we're going, to recover it and to put it into a form so that we become a movement of that. And so part of what we're doing with the neurosemantics is raising up leaders who can work together and make that happen. That's my vision. Yesterday we talked about meaning, and here's what William Blake, a poet, said. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. So the vision of self-actualization is the vision of awakening to possibilities, awakening to potentials in you and me, and actualizing our best is a function of meaning. You've got to have some great meanings, some inspiring meanings. And so yesterday, we spent time talking about the construct of our minds and how we construct meanings and give things great meanings. So meaning, the structure of meaning, that's where we were yesterday. And one of the exercises I would recommend for you from this day forward, as you move through life, as you walk through the hotel, as you drive down the highway, as you go to work, interact with colleagues, whatever happens and whatever meaning immediately comes to mind, because most of our meanings are just sitting there held in mind, waiting to be activated. And when it does, we assume that's the way it is. It's so easy to confuse map and territory. Just the way it is. Here's an exercise that'll create real flexibility for you. Whatever happens, especially if it triggers something unpleasant and unresourceful, ask yourself, what other 3 frames of reference could I use? What other 3 meanings could I give to that? Doesn't mean you have to accept them, take them, run with them. But just as you walk through life, what other 3 meanings, when you get really good, what other 7 meanings could I give to that? Because when you have that flexibility, I could look at it this way, I could look at it this way, I could look at it this way. When you have the ability to have multiple perspectives and realize everybody doesn't look at it that way. Some people look at it this way, some people look at it this way. And when you have that ability to recognize, I could give it that meaning, I could give that meaning, what meaning do I want to give to it? Because then it's that sense of, I'm the meaning maker. I live in the world of my own making. And oftentimes our cultural frames, our historical frames, our family frames, we just have lived in them so long inside that mental atmosphere that we never question them. We never even think that somehow I absorb them. And so taking ownership of your construct of meaning. This is going to be really, really important for you to own that sense of constructing meaning today as we create the crucible. What we're going to do today is to have an experience. In all the work that Maslow did, Carl Rogers did, Rolla May did about people actualizing their best, there's one aspect of that I've been trying to find some metaphors to describe and so as to create some structures and processes to enable us. How does self-actualization work? Well, having an inspiring meaning is obviously, and then trying to actualize it. But in the middle of that, it seems like most people, most of us, have to go through some intense emotional experience. Not just negative, positive as well. It seems that somehow our embodiment in flesh, that we can step back so far and get so detached from things and know things, but not know them experientially in our body. And part of our definition of neurosemantics is that it's neural semantic, that the meaning is now incorporated and embodied, because you and I are a class of life that metabolizes ideas. We can metabolize not only food and air that metabolizes for energy, but we can take an idea and get it so ingrained in us that it's just in muscle memory. And it's just part of how we move through life. Because it's now part of our neurology. Our neurology knows things. And we've talked about this many times in neurosemantics as in mind to muscle, when we do the mind to muscle pattern. Most of us know the keyboard, or at least once upon a time we knew the keyboard. I don't know if you ask me where X is, or J is, or K is. But give me a word, X, oh. Give me Jaybird, oh, huh. So my finger, always, what else do you know that you're not telling me? Kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger, talk to the hand. It's in muscle memory. And I don't have to know it consciously, it's just in my neurology. So we want to get the self-actualization there so that we don't just talk a good game of self-actualization. Because you could do that. Maslow found that as he was looking for self-actualizing people, he thought, if people talk the being values, they must be self-actualizers. And so he modeled 2 or 3 people who talked that way, wrote that way. They used the be values, truth, love, justice, music, order, contributions, spirit. And so he thought, they must be self-actualizers because it comes out of them. And then as he modeled them, he realized it's just all talk. So he said, shoot, I thought that was going to be the cue, the linguistic cue that would tell me who's a self-actualizing person. And it didn't turn out. Because we can talk it and not feel it, not live it, not be it, not have it integrated. So the integration for us is just so important. So it's our way of being in the world. So how do we get it in? Well, to some extent, this is almost asking the question, how do you put a person in state so they're really in state? They're feeling confident, they're feeling playful, they're feeling loving. How do you get them Well, it's about feeling. It's about experiencing. So the kind of learning is really experiential learning of doing and acting and running neural pathways with the way I talk and the way I move, the way I interact, and it's also getting into emotional states. So I'm using the metaphor of a crucible. We'll use some others, but that'll be our main one, a crucible. So in your manuals, on day 2, and if you skip a few pages past all the meta questions, you'll see some content on the crucible, page 46. A little box there on the crucible. A crucible is a cup-shaped piece of laboratory equipment used to contain chemical compounds when heating to very high degrees. The receptacle is usually made of porcelain or some inert metal. One of the earliest uses of palladium was to make crucibles. Crucibles are commonly used with high temperature resistance, cover or lid, and similar materials. They're melted, and so forth. So here's the metaphor of a crucible that we pour the hot liquids in, and we can mold and make new things, new materials, new equipment from a crucible that we... The paradoxical thing of a crucible is that the crucible itself is made out of very fragile materials. So if you dropped it, it could just shatter or crack and then be useless. So a crucible is holding, it's a holding place. It's a space where you can hold some really hot things that's going to dissolve and melt down and test it in the fires to test the metal. A crucible, a little different kind of crucible, I saw a whole program on Discovery about the making of swords and how mankind has, through the centuries, learned to make better and better swords and testing them in the fire and pounding them and putting some metals together to create stronger and stronger materials. And so the testing of fire, the holding of a space, well, if we do that with physical things, what is the translation, what is the experience when I can hold, as it were, a place for you to be with your hot thoughts and your hot emotions and your needs and your fears and your worries and your hopes and your dreams? What is the place where I can just hold and be present with my fragile stuff that can crack itself, but I can hold and just be present to all that you put in, so that by holding it and dissolving things and testing in the fires can allow something new to emerge, something new to arise out of that releases potential. So what I'm talking about, using this metaphor and several other metaphors, is a conversation, an interaction, a relationship. And we've all had bits of it. If you've ever sat down with someone sat down with you, and it could have been just a minute conversation, it could have been a 3-hour, and somehow you knew you were safe. You knew you were loved. You knew they believed in you, maybe believed in you more than you believed in you, and somehow they were just present, and they allowed you just to be present with the things that otherwise could scare the daylights out of you. Your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your memories, your imaginations. And they were that safe place. And out of that, as you just talked and maybe bubbled over and maybe had flooding of emotions or flooding of experience and as all that bubbling occurred, just because there was no judgment, there was no need, it was just holding that place, and had that conversation that in meta coaching we call the fierce conversation. Not because it's rough or mean or hard or cruel, but fierce because it's really getting to the core of what you're about, your dreams, your hopes, who you are, your sense of self, where we came from, where we're going. It's fierce in that it gets to the heart of something. And then out of that, there's those ahas, or that sense of being okay in your skin now. That sense of, I've got a destiny, I've got a path, I've got my next step. And out of that conversation, something new emerges. It's like you're new. It's like maybe some new potentials arise. For us in neurosemantics, this is what a coach does one-on-one in a session, enabling someone just to arise to new levels. This is what the experience of training should be, as we create a context where people can just bring in something and it can be held, and then something new can emerge. So that's what we're talking about with this crucible and the crucible experience, that kind of experience that allows us to really integrate and be a melting pot for all the valuable resources we have. So that while I may have all the resources I need, sequencing them, ordering them, putting them together, developing that resource. So the resource is there, but just like resources in the ground, gold and metal and oil and gas, I've got to drill. I've got to find it. I've got to mine it. I've got to bring it up. I've got to form it so that it's useful. It has new value now. So our resources, while we have all the resources, we may need that crucible experience to turn that resource and transform it into something really powerful. As Abraham Maslow worked with and modeled self-actualizing people, this is what he discovered, that most of them had been through some life-changing experience. And sometimes it was just an exciting, inspiring idea, and that was it. It was more of an ecstatic kind of positive feeling. Sometimes it was a living hell. Now, he did write later on that self-actualization demands discipline and structure and frustration of tolerance and the ability to handle ambiguity and confusion, and that therefore there's that growth and that development of the person. But he said, it's not that testings or trials or living hells develop people. And he said, most people who go through living hells become bitter, not better. So the question then becomes, what meanings, what frames, as you enter into your crucibles, as someone holds a space for you to bring in all the fears, the worries, the secrets, the unspoken, the unarticulated, so that you can just bring it in and hold it. What frames do you need while you're there so that you don't become bitter, but better? So that it develops. It helps to grow. So as we've thought about this, and as I've read what Maslow wrote and Rogers wrote and everything else, the raw materials on page 46 or 48, the whole section there, the raw materials that we're going to pour into the crucible, our emotions, our needy emotions, our wanting emotions, our impulses, our struggles, our virtues, our fears, our hopes, our angers, our emotions from our lower needs, our higher needs, our confusions, our disorientations, our anxieties, our experiences of hurt, of disappointment, of trauma, our excitements, our dreams, our passions, our audacious goals. So that's what we're going to put into it, and we're just going to then bring that and hold that in the crucible. There's several principles of the crucible, and you can see one on the next page in the little box. We can never transcend what we have not confronted. We can never transcend what we have not confronted. Alfred Adler, when he was part of the psychoanalytic movement, he said to get over your neurosis, you've got to love your neurosis. And others talked about how that it is the embracing and the accepting of the unacceptable that allows us to move on. That as long as we have that fight going on, then we're stuck at the level of the fight. So here's some other principles. You don't have these written in your manual, so I'll just mention a couple of these other principles of the crucible, because these will be principles we're going to be operating from, and these are principles of change, if I can find them. The first principle is exactly that we can't change what we won't accept, and so acceptance is what facilitates change, and oftentimes acceptance is the whole story. It's so counterintuitive. when I used to work with anger control with men coming out of federal penitentiary in Colorado, I would always start off by, how many like your anger? And almost nobody liked their anger, because their anger had gotten them in so much trouble and so much pain. And I said, you don't like your anger? You don't love your anger? You don't like yourself being angry? And of course, they were scratching their head wondering what planet I came from. So, because they were afraid of their anger. They were angry at their anger. They were disgusted with their anger. And so at one point, I remember one day somebody said, you wouldn't like me angry. And I said, what? You son of a bitch when you're angry? Yeah. And so the process was to get them to embrace their anger. So I would ask them, well, show me anger. They'd all do the Incredible Hulk thing. And I said, you sissies, is that all you can do? Oh, I'm really mad now. And I said, my sister can do better than that. So once the throat and everything, veins were all popping out, and I was afraid they were going to have a heart attack or a stroke. I said, okay, you can turn it up. Are you man enough? Are you guys man enough to turn it to take a deep breath, relax your arms, and tell me how you're mad as hell about something? Are you mad enough to turn it down? Or are you a sissy? You can't turn it down. You have to be. And inside of that, the frame by implication is, let's work with your anger. Turn it up, turn it down. It's yours. So the frame by implication is, let's just work with it. Let's just accept it and play with it. So accepting. We're going to be more direct today. We're just going to bring acceptance to our emotions and our needs and our impulses and all these other things we're going to do. So acceptance. You can't change what you don't accept. Acceptance changes things. And it's so paradoxical. Accepting and witnessing removes the fight. If you've got any fight going on inside you, any fight with your memories, any fight with your fears of your emotions, any fight with your needs and your impulses and your sexuality or your sensuality, or if there's any fight going on, if there's one part of me and one part of me, I mean, talk about waste of energy. And sometimes with that fight we have what we call ego defenses. Rationalization, excuses, blaming, projection. And we do all the ego. We're defending our ego because we're feeling insecure. So we're just going to welcome in the insecurity and accept the insecurity, or the ambiguity, or the confusion, or the embarrassment. Or we're just going to accept it. Just witness. Just notice what it's like. Witnessing eliminates the fight. That's the principle. Witnessing, just observing. In one sense, that is the greatest gift that any therapist will give to anybody. Because in therapy, unlike any other conversation, where all the family members have been, well, you should try this, you should do this, why don't you try this, what's wrong with you, can't do judgments, evaluations, the therapist says, bring it on, tell me what it's about. And sometimes the therapist won't even say anything. And the person walks out feeling good. Just because they were in that space where someone just witnessed what was going on, so the person could say it. And sometimes just saying it gets it out, and it's not that different from eliminating the liquids and other things from our bodies. Some people have mental constipation, emotional constipation. And sometimes just letting it go. As we witness, well, I don't need that. And so sometimes saying, have you ever said something to somebody and just that once you finally said it, it just let it go. It's like, it's done. And so witnessing eliminates the fight. Acceptance creates the change. Unconditional positive regard means that change is not a threat. Unconditional positive regard means change is not a threat. This was what Carl Rogers contributed to the whole human potential movement. He came up with 3 things that are the key things for therapeutic change. that the therapist must have unconditional positive regard, accurate empathy, not just empathy, but accurate empathy, able to say what the client is expressing and provide that back, accurate empathy, and then authenticity, to be real, to be a real human being. Now, Carl Rogers mentioned those three. I think he left one thing out, but he did lots and lots of research. His book on becoming a person is a research book of all the research he did to validate that these are the change mechanisms. And most of them, those three, unconditional positive regard, accurate empathy, and being authentic is at the heart of this space that I'm wanting to describe and for us to build today.
What are you saying? Accurate empathy?
Accurate empathy.
Accurate.
So it's like I can be empathetic and concerned and compassionate, but if I don't understand and can't say in words where you really are, then while I care, you won't feel like I really understand you. And the word understand is interesting, to stand under. So when I stand under somebody, I'm supporting. Because I'm standing under, providing a support, a foundation. And when you feel understood, then you feel like you got some ground to stand on because someone is supporting. So these three things will be part and parcel of this crucible space we're going to create. So unconditional positive regard. It's what we did yesterday with esteem, with standing in awe, with raising our sense of the value and the meaning of a human being and separating person from behavior. If I can just stand in awe of you and recognize that maybe you're an angry genius, maybe you're a frustrated genius, maybe you're a confused genius, but whatever it is, if I see you through those eyes, because most of us start to build our own self-image through how we see ourselves reflected in the eyes of those around us. And one of the gifts you can give as a coach, as a parent, as a manager, as a business owner, is to see people as full of potential. And Cheryl Gilroy teaches diffusing skills in Australia, and she walks into a whole bunch of people. Sometimes she does conflict resolution between groups of people, union and management and other things. She walks in and they're all angry, and she walks in and she says, yeah, they're angry geniuses. Look at them. What will they become when I hold this space? But that's the kind of attitude. So unconditional positive regard makes change no threat. When you feel that to change, to alter, to transform, any kind of change is a threat, somehow your sense of self is in danger. And so you may not be giving yourself that unconditional positive regard, that self-esteeming, or someone else may not be giving it to you. So as you create a crucible for you, as you create a crucible for someone else, when we value them absolutely, then there's no threat. And the person will feel safe. You will feel safe with you. And then growth can occur. So threat is the interference. Threat is the biggest interference for your self-actualization. That's why the self-esteeming and self-appreciating is just so crucial for that. And Rogers called it unconditional positive regard. Change, this is the fourth principle, change is the human adventure into growth and reality and truth and clarity. Change is the human adventure into growth, reality, truth, clarity. So this is the adventure, growth. And so developmental psychology has really identified that we don't stop growing when we get 18 or 25 or 35, that there's stages of development as we continue the whole lifespan process. In fact, if you read Maslow, you'll see that he mostly called his psychology growth psychology. He very seldom called it self-actualization psychology. He called it growth psychology. And sometimes he called it expressive psychology. Because to him, that's what it was all about, growing. Just continually growing. A lot of us live in cultures where we have this frame that, I read when I was in high school. So growth. And the last one is change is reorganization, not elimination. Change is reorganization. So we're not making things go away in the sense that we're going to eliminate a part of us as if a part of us is bad. We're going to transform it. Anger is not bad. Anger, if you transform it, can be fighting for justice and truth. Fear is not bad. Fear, when you do it, can be wise risk-taking and excitement. So we're going to transform it. And every need you have and every impulse you have is just human stuff. And so we don't want to get rid of it. We don't want to get rid of our sexuality, or sensuality, or spirituality. These are just impulses that we have as part of the human experience. We want to reorganize those things so that serve us well. So that'll be some of the principles of the crucible. You can see a picture of the crucible here, and you can see the requirements. We're going to meditate unconditional positive regard. This will be the material for the walls, if you want to think of it in that way. The walls of the crucible will be the walls of positive regard, of standing in awe of ourselves, believing in the essential goodness of human nature, in your nature, valuing yourself as precious, as sacred, as mysterious, as wonderful. Witnessing will be the second thing. So then we will bring a sense of witnessing, so that whatever we bring in there, we just notice and witness without judging or feeling like we need to do anything to fix it. We'll just observe. So this will be the NOP state of knowing nothing and just observing and being curious and playful and just witnessing. So we're going to bring a witnessing state, and so we're going to lose the mind from all of our judgments and just observe and be sensory aware of it. So the witnessing state. Then the acceptance state. We began building that yesterday. This does not mean resignation or condoning. It means welcoming into our awareness and acknowledging it for whatever it is. Here we acknowledge and celebrate all of our fallible responses as fallible responses, and knowing that our responses are expressions of us and not who we are. So just accepting and embracing and welcoming and letting it be, and of course that stops the fight. Appreciation is the next one. So we're going to bring appreciation to this. Appreciation is the ability to see value. To see value. Now, Maslow used a special word, sacralize. So it's sacred, sacralize. And he says one of the biggest dangers, and he spoke in the 1960s about this, he said in the 1960 American culture, there was so much desacralizing. Everybody just said, this is no good, this is no good, and there's a lot of protests and things. And he said, this is a big problem because when you discount everything, when nothing counts, when nothing has value, you're going to end up with a valueless world. And the opposite is to see value, to sacralize, to let every moment be a special sacred moment. Every encounter a sacred moment, to sacralize, to appreciate. What I found, I got to that in a little different route. At the heart of wealth creation is this very thing. Because what is wealth? Well, something you value. Wealth is not absolute. It's what in any given culture people say has value. And if you value it, then it has exchange value. So a wealth creator is a person who can see a problem that they can solve and add value with a tangible product, with service, with attitude, and that if you walk through the world looking for how can I add value, where can value be added, and see everything is special enough to add value, you'll start to become a wealth creator. Because the very way you talk is adding value. The very way you interact is adding value. Everything you do is adding value. And if that's your frame of mind, every time you're with another human being, you're always thinking in the back of your mind, how can I add value? And people will want your presence because you're adding value. And if you're creating products or services, it adds value. This is the heart of wealth creation. So appreciation is such a powerful, powerful state, and so we're going to bring appreciation in there. This will seem really weird and strange when you're going to appreciate your anger, appreciate your fear, your sadness, your embarrassment. Really appreciate how you can get embarrassed. Appreciate your sexuality. Appreciate your sensuality, your tenderness, your tears, your joy, your ecstatic. As we appreciate these human experiences and powers and find how does that add value? And how can I refine it and test it in this fire so that it can add such value to the people around me? So appreciation is going to be the thing that will sacralize everything. Talk about adding meaning. This is where in the crucible, whatever you bring into the crucible, it's going to become so meaningful. Now the big challenge is when you bring your problems in. How can I appreciate this problem? How can I, because then you can have that transformation occur and the problem can become the very strength that you offer. This is what Maslow found in many self-actualizing people. It wasn't that they had had a problemless life, but whatever problems they had, somehow they brought that problem in, just witnessed it, noticed it, accepted it, embraced it, had no fight with it. And then they started using that problem, transforming that problem, appreciating that problem. And that problem, what once was the very thing that was their pain in the center of them, is now their strength. We'll talk more about that tomorrow as we move into synthesizing it. But not only do we bring our strengths in, we bring our weaknesses in. And this will be where the challenge of being a meaning maker. Can I appreciate that problem? Can I honor and recognize and look for something special, sacred in? What if you had a frame? Every problem truly has a nugget, a diamond, a gem of preciousness there. So instead of fighting the problem, hating the problem, why does this have to happen? Instead of doing that, what if you just witnessed it, accepted it, and then started sacralizing it, looking for where you... And so I'll tell a couple stories about myself tomorrow with regard to how this has been playing out in my own life, because this is where the test of the crucible will really occur. Now, if you're doing therapy and not coaching, or therapy and not mentoring or training, or if you're... so therapy, this is the heart of therapy, bringing problems in. And most people hate their problems and fight their problems. And so the shift will occur when they can learn to look for value in the problem. So we'll get to that a little bit later. That's a part of the crucible. The last one here is ruthless honesty. Being willing to speak truth. Not truth with capital T, but just the truth of the moment, the truth of the perception, the truth of the feeling, the truth of the situation. Speaking the truth, the reality. So we just look at whatever is. Our weaknesses, our strengths, the cards that life has dealt us. To get to the heart of things where we can have this fierce conversation, this confrontation, in order to get feedback that's real, that's actual, that's authentic. To put it into the defense and the escape mechanisms, all pretending about reality, defending ourselves against reality, to stop treating reality as an enemy and to make ourselves a friend of it. How much of a friend are you of reality? It takes a lot of ego strength just to look at it. Well, the situation, whatever the situation is. I remember the day when my mother called me and said that my father had died. He died of a heart attack suddenly and unexpectedly. We really didn't expect it at all. And I remember hearing that. I went out for a run before I took my flight home. And I remember running. And I remember what my mind wanted to do. I wanted to say the words, I can't believe it. But I knew that those words, I can't believe it, would put me in, as an... I was making myself an enemy to what's real. So I could hear it. I was aware enough, I was aware enough about that, to hear that. And as soon as I heard that, I said, no, I will believe it. I don't want to. I want to rage against the heavens about it, but I will believe it. And I could hear, 2 minutes later, I can't believe this. I can't believe Dad's dead. So the ability to make myself a friend of reality, whatever is. And if I fight, my younger brother Steve, he had the same tape. We got to the funeral, no tears, because his frame was, it's not real. I can't believe this. I won't believe it. 2 years later, he called me up and he said, Mike, he said, Dad's dead. I said, yeah, I know. I said, and so I tried to be a crucible to him. I said, just what's going on? And so he told, so he unleashed his boiling emotions about it all. But it took him 2 years just to pull down the barrier and say, okay, I'll accept what's real. So facing what's real, what's true, and this is not capital T, this is just small t, just true to your situation, your emotion. So if you feel angry, say you're feeling angry. If you're saying you feel like a bum, say you feel like a bum. So say the truth. Just because by getting it out, a lot of times it is garbage. And just by getting out, releasing it, and not being afraid of what you're experiencing. Because if you're afraid of your experience, it can go nowhere except just really get you stuck. So the crucible is this place where we can just be ruthlessly truthful. This is what an effective coach does. An effective coach, unlike a therapist will be nurturing and supporting and loving and helping to build ego strength and ego strength and ego strength and slowly exposing to truth so a person can get it. But a coach doesn't play that at all. A coach is dealing with self-actualizing people, healthy people, and so the coach is going to be saying the truth and confronting from a crucible standpoint, but presenting the truth to people who don't hear the truth often. Graham Richardson is a meta coach in Sydney, Australia. He works as he says, the upper side of town, which means he gets about $10,000 a day. I said to him, wouldn't you want to invite me to the upper side of town? But he gets paid because he goes into top executives and he says, my main skill as a coach is ruthlessly compassionate. If you hire me, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire and you're not going to get by with anything. Because he's talking to people who, for the most part, all their lives have all these yes people around them. And they got layers and layers of people filtering the truth from them. So they don't know what's happening. And so Graham comes in, and he has no attachment, no ego investment, no politics to play. He's not there to please anybody. In fact, he says, I'm not going to please you. I'm going to make you as mad as hell. I'm going to make you hate me. And most people do. Because that's what he sells. So he knows, and he just reflects back. And so he may say, we've had this conversation. You've only looked at me once. When you talk, you tend to look up there. Do you ever get this feedback that people say to you that you're not with them? He'll say, he'll tell them truth. And of course, they'll get red, because no one talks to them that way. But, they're paying him $10,000 a day. Okay, so? Because he's speaking truth to them and giving a clean, accurate, real, immediate, authentic feedback that we need. So this ruthless honesty. Here's a quotation, and you can see that from this quotation is where I've gotten a lot of this. Writing about self-actualizers, Maslow wrote, they could let themselves be flooded with emotions. Then the next paragraph, in trying to figure out why this is so, it seems to me that much of it could be traced back to a relative absence of fear in my subjects. They seem to be less afraid of what people would say or demand or laugh at. They had less need of other people and therefore depended on them less, could be less afraid of them, less hostile against them. Perhaps more important was their lack of fear of their own insides, of their own impulses, emotions, thoughts. They were more self-accepting than the average. And the bottom paragraph, by protecting himself against the hell within himself, he also cuts himself off from the heaven within. As a consequence, more of themselves is available for use, for enjoyment, for creative purposes. They waste less of their time and energy protecting themselves against themselves. So the variables, the qualities, the indicators of self-actualizing is in the little italics there. Less afraid of your insides. So we're going to just unconditional positive regard and acceptance, less afraid of our insides, less need for approval, more self-reliant and self-trust, more self-available, and this helps to create that crucible. So we got 5 elements we're going to we're going to use to create a crucible. So you can be a crucible to yourself, to your loved ones, to your children, to your spouses, to colleagues, to clients if you do that. So that we'll do that. So the next page, the crucible questions. Ego defenses is an interesting concept that Sigmund Freud developed about how we defend against our sense of self because we feel threatened. And we have intellectualization and rationalization and denial and projection and just lots and lots of defenses. And those defenses not only take up mental energy, because now you can, what secret am I keeping from him or her and she doesn't know, because you got to remember all this stuff, as well as all the physiological energy that it takes to create that defensiveness. And once the defensiveness is gone, once you're okay to be authentic with yourself, you've got a lot of physical energy, a lot of mental and emotional energy now available for what you want, for what really captivates your interests. And so life now has a different orientation, not deficiency and defensiveness, but flow and abundance and expressiveness and growth. So here are the questions, and just some questions that you can ask yourself or others. Do you fully esteem yourself as lovable, valuable, worthwhile? Is your self-esteeming completely unconditional? Do you fully separate yourself from your behaviors? So you may want to find some words, some metaphors, some frames, something that helps you do that. I would recommend, if you want to get it into your neurology, use your gestures. Person is different from behavior. Expressions, verbal expressions, mental expressions, emotional expressions, behavioral expressions, not me. Expressions of me. And I've done that so many times with my gesture, I feel it. I can't even say the words person, behavior. Because just like typing, just like driving, putting a tie, tying a shoe, once your neurology knows how to feel it, it's in your muscle memory. And so in neurosemantics, we do a lot of coaching the body to feel by getting a person to use their gestures. And so if you will gesture these kinds of things. So witnessing, how well can you step back from an experience and just observe it? Do you have permission to just observe? To what degree can you step back into an observing know-nothing state? How clean is your witnessing state from judgment and evaluation? So witnessing. You may want to find something. I usually like to think of standing on a balcony and looking over and just watching all the activity going on. You could imagine this room from just one floor up. If there was an open ceiling and a balcony, and just looking down, seeing yourself, seeing who's around you, just witnessing. Take second position so you witness. When you step there, you're not dissociating. Step into a clean state of curious, caring observation. So be like a detective, just looking for the facts of this case. And so just witnessing. The acceptance one we did yesterday, how easy is it for you to accept in your acknowledgement of what is? How quickly can you access a state of full acceptance? How enabling, how ennobling is your acceptance state? What we're doing here in this workshop is putting these together, and in the next few days, I would recommend, if you don't have easy access to acceptance. Now you can see I've got that in my muscle memory, I would recommend practice until you can just step into acceptance. So when something occurs and you want to judge, you can step back, and you got the feeling, the neurology, the breath, the face of just acceptance. Because your ability to step into any one of these states is going to be really critical. Vasily?
Just a word, ennobling.
Ennobling.
Do you have a synonym or another word for that?
So noble.
It's related to noble, yeah.
Noble
Okay.
and making noble,
Okay.
making special, making sacred. Nancy?
Is acceptance. I mean, if there's some things that you just don't want to, that you think is not good, in life, or you want
Okay.
to fix or something, can you still stay in the acceptance and wanting to change? I mean,
Yes, but
You
I
know what
wouldn't
I'm
do
saying?
both at the same time.
What's your question?
Okay. With acceptance, what if there's something that you want to change? Can you accept and want to change it? So, anybody else has that question? So, yes, but I would keep them sequenced.
okay.
So I accept. The second thought is going to be, okay, what can I do to facilitate change and transformation? But if it's not clean, if you're accepting to change, then you're really not accepting. So keep them clean. So the accepting is just noticing what is, and it's just noticing what is and acknowledging. That may be a better word for some of you, acknowledging. Just, okay, this is what is. And so as you think about other things, like most of us as parents, when our children were very young, maybe they vomited and threw up. And so depending on your response, this may not be a good illustration. But, we could get ourselves all worked up about the vomit, or we could just, if we're really just accepting, little children do this. They expelled it, and it means something. It means something didn't settle well. So we go and clean. We just take care of facts without needing a lot of emotion with it. So we accept the puke. Just something memorable to carry with you, so that we then can step into the change mode. Let me get Barbara.
Play that before we step into it, right?
If a client called you and said they wanted to kill themselves, something like that you can't say, oh, I accept that, and if you do that.
Oh, sure. This is exactly what Milton Erickson did. He would say, you want to kill yourself. Okay. When? Where? How? And he would talk to them fully accepting where they were. And one lady who came in, she was real depressed, and he said, okay, look. And so he said, let's make a plan. Have you got a letter that who are you going to leave it for? Who wants to find your body? And he said, listen, if you're going to go out, might as well go out in style. He says, you got any money? And she said, yeah, I got so much money in the bank. He said, I want you to go out and buy just really doll up and get your fingernails done and get your hair done. And so the next week she comes in and she's looking really good. She's smiling. And he said, okay, let's talk about the letter that you're going to leave when you commit suicide. She said, are you sick? But it's the NLP thing of pace, pace, pace. Start where they are. And so it may sound so counterintuitive, but everybody in that person's life tries to talk them out of it.
One of my neighbors came to my house and said she wanted to kill herself. And I went, oh, is that a goal or a feeling? And she said, oh, it's just a feeling.
So a good question, is that a goal or a feeling? How far along have you gone? If we feel afraid, apprehensive, worried, then that metastates them with more worry, fearful, and we give it that feeling. So if we just say, okay, let's talk about it. Because then we're creating that space where they can just be with their feelings, with their goals. And we get them to think it through, because that's what this space, the crucible, is a place for reflection. Most of us live our lives and we rush. And very seldom do we just stop and just witness and just accept and just sacralize whatever it is. So we could even bring appreciation to, it's a real skill to have quality life, and apparently you don't have the quality of life that you think might well end it. And they'll go, because you're pacing verbally. And say, this must mean that you really care about the quality of life. And they'll go, and your life now sucks. And so your decision is to live a quality life or not. I respect that in you. I honor that in you. Would you want to work on making it really special? You've got so much pacing there, you're going to lead now. But we start with pacing. So this is that counterintuitive nature of it.
So if suicide is a cry for help, then by accepting it, you're honoring their cry for help.
Yeah. So what a great frame. It's a cry for help.
But what about if it's a teenager?
I would do the same thing. That I'm not afraid. This is the same thing with all kinds of things, whether it's a sexual abuse kind of things, whether it's anger control things, violence. If I know it's just human stuff, and you're made out of the same stuff I'm made out of, and I don't need to be afraid of this. Let's just talk. Let's find out what's going on, because that usually is a problem. There's so much fight going on, and if you think you're giving them judgment, how much judgment they're giving themselves. And so it is counterintuitive, and we've got to train our intuitions to not do what seems most intuitive, and that is to straighten them out and correct them. And because usually we're operating out of our insecurity. What if they kill themselves? And actually, our ego's in the way. Because we're worried about how it's going to reflect on us. Instead of really being present to them and supporting them. And the paradox is that when we... My belief, here's a belief I have. I believe most of us, above anything and everything else, we want to be understood. And even if the person doesn't agree with me, if they'll take the time to be present to me and understand me, and if they say, well, I disagree with you, we've just felt understood. And what an incredible experience that is to be fully understood. Gary?
Michael, I think there may be a distorted frame by implication that when we accept things, that's what we want.
Right.
And that's not acceptance.
Right. That acceptance is just acknowledgement.
Being okay with it.
Being okay
not
with
necessarily
what
wanting it, but being okay with it.
Yeah. So it's not condoning. So if you've got condoning and acceptance merged together, pull those apart. It's just acknowledging what is, not condoning it. So a lot of us have a hard time getting into acceptance because we think, now I'm approving of it. But it's not condoning, it's just acknowledging.
The concept of pacing and bringing it out rather than pushing back. We talked about that with other people. Does that work with yourself?
Great question. Does this work with yourself? We talk about accepting and acknowledging, pacing with others. Learning to pace your own self and to acknowledge what is and just being present with it, because otherwise we have that fight and that internal conflict, and then the energy is wasted. So the first crucible, if you never use a crucible with another person, at least using it with you to just acknowledge and just accept what is. The acceptance is just such a magical, wonderful thing once we can embrace it. Ryan? Even with pain control, does this work with pain control? Milton Erickson used this very process with pain control. So one of his processes was headaches, and it's called several things. It's called fractionalization, which in NLP we would break down to the specific submodalities. So he would work with someone to have headache, and he would say, is it heat or is it pulsing? Is it throbbing? Is it bum, bum, or is it bum, 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 bum? And so, of course, to answer those questions, you have to step back and just witness. He would say, well, where's the center of it, and where does it go? And where does it go to where it's not there? And when you come to the border of it, and it's just a little bit of it, and so you're stepping back, just noticing it. And if you do that, it will not be able to stay. So it's a pain control thing that's based upon just acknowledging and accepting. And for years I was hoping, wish I'd get a headache. And every once in a while I get one, and I start playing with it, and then I go. Somebody give me a headache. Application phobias, I don't know that right off, since we got such a wonderful phobia process with the movie Rewind. So these are the 5 states of the crucible, and as you can see, we're going to access these states, put these together, and the pattern on page 50 is building up a crucible. What I want to do is to make sure you have easy access to all of these states. So I'm going to do a demonstration, And we'll take a break, and I'll do the demonstration. After the demonstration, I want to make sure everybody has easy access to this, and then we're going to give you plenty of time to start building a crucible so that you can hold a space and present a space to someone else with these 5 qualities. So that's the design of this morning. That's all we're going to accomplish this morning. This afternoon, we'll talk about what do you want to bring into the crucible. And we'll talk about, we've got many different processes for that. What do you want to bring into the crucible to deal with? But the crucible will become essentially this experience, this conversation. It may not even be a conversation. It may just you holding the presence, being with someone as they bring into it the unspoken fears, the secrets that's eating away in the back of their mind, the ways that they have internal conflicts. Because all of these things are the interferences, the leashes that hold us back and that prevent us from growing to the next step, from actualizing our highest potentials, because there's this fight inside. So that's what we're going to do. Questions about that? Okay.
Almost like a meta program of these meta states?
It's a process. I don't think of a meta program, but it's a process of these states. I mentioned that I'd say some other things of other metaphors. When we look at people who've made a tremendous difference on this planet, most of them go through a crucible experience. What would Martin Luther King have been or done if he hadn't been in jail in Birmingham and wrote his letter? His letter created the vision for the civil rights movement. And his letter and his time in that jail. What would Nelson Mandela have been? What would he have accomplished if for 26 years he wasn't in the jail there on that island at Cape Town? And developing the kind of person who, when he got out, was forgiving. And could bring a country together with no civil war. And the people in domination would step back and allow someone else to take reign. We talk about a self-actualizing person. So the jail did not make him bitter. It made him better. And most people like that. We think about Moses in the wilderness for 40 years, or Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days, or Jonah in the belly of the whale. These are metaphors of a crucible kind of experience that transforms people. And so a crucible is, and you've probably had little crucibles in your life, or maybe big crucibles, but there also may have been experiences which could have been a crucible, but you didn't let it become that. It created a fight. And maybe that still is the thing that now is like a big interference that hasn't been resolved. And so that's what we want to work on.
Well, I was just thinking, like, for example, in Buddhism, enlightenment is created out of a crucible, if you say it like that, like when Buddha would sit under the tree and he would not eat for 40 days, and suddenly he would understand how life works.
Okay.
So that's a similar experience.
So it's that time in which we're almost taken out of life, and we have that reflection. And in that reflection, if you're not judging in that reflection, if you're just observing and accepting and then appreciating, bringing your creative power, how can I make meaning out of this? How could I use this to be more, to give more, to contribute more, to feel more, to think more? And so it's that kind of experience. So into the crucible, you may want to take some things that have really galled you in the past or upset you or frustrated you, or it feels like that was the time I shut down. And bring it in so that it can be transformed, and with your meaning-making powers, you can now transform it and create a new synergy of things that can emerge.
This process with the crucible, but it sounds to me like you take parts of this throughout your life. And just like the witnessing, or what is it that you can use once you've done the main one to carry on, to just have that new frame of...
Okay. Let me come back to that at the end of the day, because that'd be a good question at the end of this day when we have all experienced the beginning of building this, and then asking that application question. Okay. So let's take a 15